Namaste to all of you. I'm a biochemist who takes interest in the forgotten scientists of India, because as Indians we don't know our rich scientific heritage. So I'm very happy that Srijan Foundation had invited me for this talk. I'm honored because many of this platform has been used by many distinguished speakers in the past, many of whom are my role models. So my topic for today is reviving the scientific legacy of India. So as Indians, most of us are not exposed to our rich scientific heritage. We all know the Kali era started at 3102 BC, depending on how you calculate. But I always felt that our Kali era started from 1947, after India got its independence, and not, as people say, that when in 12th century when Islamic invasions happened and destroyed universities, because at that time our main role was to fight them and dispel those invaders. So we don't have any time to think about all these things. But still the Kerala school of mathematics, even in those periods, flourished, mainly because the Islamic rulers could not penetrate that deep. But it's from 1947, the policies of our government was such that it always created a perception. Yes, it did say that India is a very, it's a culturally rich country, but the narrative was always that we have always assimilated different cultures. Its popular rhetoric was that Mughals gave us tandoor, the British gave us a railway system, and as Indians, we have not given anything to any part of the world. We have not influenced anyone. That's a wrong narrative, in my opinion, because as Indians, it's just a one-way street. Everyone else influences us, but we have never influenced anyone. It's just as though there is a check valve somewhere there which allows only one-way traffic and there is no two-way traffic. So the main problem was because as such, even if we have some inventions, if we have some research, people used to dilute it, saying that, oh yes, it has Greek roots, Latin roots, Arabic roots, and all those things. But there is no substantial proof for any of those arguments. If you go down deep, there is no substantial proof where they used to say, yes, Aryabhata's tables were really good, or Pythagoras' theorem was there, Bodhyana Sulabhasastras was there, which is same as Pythagoras' theorem, but Egyptian had already done that research before. But they had not done it. Even if there is no primary reference, if you go as much as you research, you cannot find any primary reference of such an influence. So I would say that it was all an Indian discovery, and we always started to dilute our own scientific heritage. It's just a scientific heritage I'm focusing today, but it applies to all walks of all kinds of fields which India had excelled in. So the problem was that the popular narrative was, even when I was in my school days, popular narrative is that Indians, there is no doubt that Indians have discovered zero. But in mathematics, the contribution of India towards mathematics is zero. So that was a common perception that we all had when we grew up. But that is not true at all. We have contributed much more than zero. So who is to blame for all these things? I feel that it's us who are to blame for all these things, because we were ingesting those narratives just as though we were not fighting it. We were just ingesting what the government policies were there at that time. And it was mainly because we were trying to ape the West. We were always trying to have an approval from the West. The Britishers, we had forcefully asked them to get out. Physically they are out, but still their soft power still influences us. Even to this date, even if you take Gurumurthy's lectures, he always says it's a soft power which is more powerful than the hard power. When India was a thriving civilization, it was the software which influenced all the civilization. We never set a foot anywhere to influence any other people. It was all the people who came from other civilization to learn whatever we had. So the Britishers and the West have this software, and it still influences us. Even to the recent debates on the NRC and CAA, we always have this Western stamp of approval we need. If they say it's right, it's right. If they say it's not, then we think that, oh, it's completely wrong. So, I mean, even if you say some decades ago, the BBC and all, many broadcasting agencies, including, I think, the BBC, I'm not sure, but they had ridiculed that Indians were taking dip in the Ganges, holy Ganges, that it's all blind belief, superstition, mumbo jumbo. That's the common word they use, mumbo jumbo. So, but if you look, I mean, how many people know that in 1896, it was a French scientist and a British scientist who analyzed the water of Ganga. So they found that the water of Ganga has a lot of bacteriophages. So bacteriophage is nothing but a virus which infects bacteria. So that's a bacteriophage. So those bacteriophages, there are so many bacteriophages that it kills microorganisms such as Vibrio cholerae, which causes cholera, and even tuberculosis mycobacterium. So, so it was only recently it was highlighted that it is not that, I mean, it cleanses you spiritually, which of course it does, but it also cleanses you physically. Yeah, it's a different thing that we have not taken care well of the holy Ganges, but it is because that it has this bacteriophages, and it is from where the water flows, it has so many of these plants from where the Ganga originates, and that's the source, one of the sources of this rich variety of bacteriophages. So bacteriophages will not infect humans. It is one which infects the bacteria. It's a virus which attacks the bacteria. So, and even in the popular, I mean, even 2 or 3 years back, we have, there was an aversion to anything Indian, even if it's substantiated very well. For example, there was a news anchor from a popular news television. I don't need to name that television. You know, you all know this because it's based in New Delhi. So, this news anchor was actually equating the works of Sushruta and Charaka to a myth. She was comparing it to some Odysseus or Ulysses or some Greek and Latin mythology. But I mean, we all know that the first plastic surgery meeting which took place in France is 1932. The invocation was the first chapter of Sushruta Samhita. That's the first, that is how they read and invoked that. And if Columbia has a statue of Sushruta, so even Australian universities have that. And even to this age, the rhinoplasty methods used by Charaka is still, they use a similar kind of work for their plastic surgery. So, why the West had this problem with religion is what we need to understand, because they influence us more than we influence ourselves. So, in West, it was always a problem because in West, the religion and science did not go hand in hand. They were considered as eternal enemies. So, because the church thought that the science is there to take the power away from them. But, and as a result, there are a lot of cases. For example, Galileo is the famous case where he was put under house arrest because he just said that the earth moves around the sun. But in India, it was never the case like that. We had always integrated science and religion. So there is a beautiful verse in the Isha Upanishad which goes as Vidyancha Avidyancha Yastad Devo Bhem Saha Avidyaya Mrityum Tirtva Vidyaya Mritumam Shrute, which means that Vidya, which is the external knowledge which is gained by experience, and Avidya is the spiritual knowledge. If you have the experimental knowledge, you lose out on the subtle realities of life, like I respect my father. How would you prove that in science? I respect my mother. How do you prove that in science? You cannot prove that unambiguously. And avidya is the one which is the spiritual path. And if you know only avidya, we lose out on the gross truths of the day-to-day life. So we had integrated both avidya and vidya, and that is how you cross the ocean of our material life and experience eternal bliss. That's how we had framed us our system. And in fact, there are a lot of verses from our religious scriptures which forms the basis of the science. For example, if you see this verse, Yojana Nam Sahasram Dave Dave Shate Dave Cha Yojane Ekena Nimirsharthena Kramamana Namostute. So this is a verse which Sayana uses to calculate the speed of light. So, I mean, when I was in my 11th and 12th, there was this book called H.C. Verma. I am sure many people would have heard of this book, H.C. Verma. So, there in the speed and velocity chapter, you have H.C. Verma quotes this equation, and and he says how they derived the speed of light from this verse in the Rig Veda. Similarly, there are many such verses. For example, Apam Samyoga Bhave Gurutvat Patanam, which is the gravity. We have, and this is not the only verse for gravity, there are other verses too. I am just showing it, and this is from the Vaisheshika Sutra. And then the popular Hanuman Chalisa, where we have Yug Sahasra Yojan Par Bhanu, Lilio Tahi Madhur Fal Janu, where they calculate the distance between the earth and the sun. And if you calculate, it is just a plus or minus a few meters is the difference of the error. So, and then this one is one where we say that Atha tata urdhva udeta naiva udetana astameta ekala eva madhyes tatha, which means the sun is in the center, it neither rises nor it sets, it is in the center. So we all knew this. I mean, this all forms the basis of science and people say Kepler discovered this, or Newton discovered gravity, or all those things, but it's not like that. Speed of light was discovered by, I mean, I will say that we might not have the experimental evidence, but we knew what is the speed of light, because here he pays respect to the rays of light coming from Lord Surya. So what is the relevance in today's state? So we know that our metallurgy, our textile science, our mathematics, astronomy, plastic surgery, health science was no inferior to any other civilization. In fact, we were one of the world leaders in all these fields until the 12th century, when Bikhtiyar Khilji invaded us and attacked so many universities, and which caused our dark ages. But we should be proud of our heritage. I mean, the first point is, if we don't respect ourselves, then nobody will respect us. So, and we need to be proud of ourselves. And it's not being proud, we need to also inform the world about all these things. I mean, I'm sure after the social media explosion, we all came to know about many things that we did not know before. But still, there are many people who don't know about these things, only because it is not being discussed in popular forums. So, and the reason that Indians have never advertised themselves in a manner the West advertises themselves. So even, for example, when we write grants in academic institution, we always try to highlight our advantages. And of course, there will be disadvantages. Every grant has a disadvantage or a limitation. We try to tone down on the limitation, but I found that Indians do the opposite. We try to highlight our limitations and then tone down our advantages. I mean, usually, I mean, at least in this field, I'm just giving an example. So the reason I'm giving this talk is because I want everyone to know about a lot of scientists which people are not aware of. I'm not going into the Vedic period. I'm going into the period which people are more comfortable with the post-British period, because many people think the history of India started from the Mughals or from after British invaded India. So I'm just going into that. So I'm just going to touch about the brief biographical sketches of few of these scientists. The number of scientists are innumerable, so I'm not going to go through all of them. And even when you start to explore or research on the scientists, there is not much material available, which highlights that we don't know much about what they have done. It's the research, yes, research is there, but without delving more into the research, if the other things, we don't know anything about these scientists at all. I mean, we know lot things about some particular families in India, everything what they do and where they go, but not about people who matter to us. So the first scientist I will be talking about is Dr. Janaki Edavalat Ammal. She was also known as the mother of Indian botany. She is one of the first botanists in the pre-independence, woman botanist in the pre-independence independent India. And people say that we don't give respect to women and scientists are not many women scientists are there. She is an example where she has fought all odds to come to this level, and she has done groundbreaking research in cytogenetics, and she has contributed a lot towards development of crops which can sustain tropical conditions. So she had a very tough, her early life was in a very tough conditions, because basically the Britishers never were involved in good administrative, especially at the school level. The school level at that time was really bad, and people used to have lot of difficulty in attending, even getting primary education. So she was born in 1897 in a village called Thalassery in Kerala, and she attended this Sacred Heart School, which is a girls' school, and then from there she did her BSc in Queen Mary's College. So she did her masters in botany in the Presidency College, and she was very interested in botany because right from her childhood her father used to take her for walks in the garden. So she used to be really intrigued by the flowers and the plants. So that made her study botany, and she chose a very particular field called to understand the cellular mechanisms of plants, and that helped her a lot. In the following slides I will explain how it helped her. So she was more involved in understanding the cellular mechanism of plants. So she joined the Women's Christian College as a lab demonstrator, and during this period she applied for the Louis Balbour Scholarship. So the Louis Balbour Scholarship is a scholarship which was given out to Asian women students so that they could go to US to do their research and then come back to India or wherever country they are from, and to contribute towards that country. That was the main aim for this Louis Balbour Scholarship. So many were telling, I mean, she was not hopeful of getting it, but she just applied, and because of her work experience, she happened to crack the scholarship, and she was one of the 57 women who could go to US for this scholarship. This is an old photo from one of the biographies of Janaki Ammal. So in Michigan, she had no hesitation to choose what fields she needed to specialize in. She chose cytology. She started to work with a professor who was Professor Harley Harris Bartlett, who was known for research in tropical crops. So they used to prepare different types of intergenic hybrids which could survive the tropical conditions, and this she thought that it will be very applicable to India, because India at such conditions you don't see a lot of crops which are able to sustain or grow in those conditions. So she did her research with Professor Harley Harris Bartlett, and she worked on the plant chromosome, and the first hybrid she created was this Indian brinjal called the Janaki Bengal. So this is a hybrid, intergenic hybrid which thrives in tropical conditions, and some of the brinjal we have today has originated from Janaki Brinjal. So, so in the end she was offered a doctorate in sciences, and her study was the chromosome studies in a plant called Nicandra physaelioides. So she wanted to take this skill and come back to India. So she did return to India, and she was one of the few Asian women to get a doctorate of science by Michigan, and at that time I think she was the first Indian woman botanist to get this degree from the Michigan University. So she came to India, and at that time she joined the Maharaja College of Science. So she was a professor, but she soon realized that the teaching and research are completely different, and she also realized that the British were more inclined in I mean, their education, the sole purpose of their education was to get them some manpower to do things for them. That was the sole purpose of their education. They are not concerned about research or anything else. So the scientist in her wanted to apply for a research position. So she applied to this sugarcane breeding institute. So this institute, I think it was started in the 1920s by Madan Mohan Malaviya. So, he, at that time, our Indian sugarcane was not sweet, and it would have a lot of diseases, and it would not survive the tropical conditions at those times. So we used to import the sugarcane for Papua New Guinea. So that's how we used to import at those in 1920s. So Madan Mohan Malaviya, he actually made this research organization, and he employed some scientists there. One of them was Sri Tiruvadi Sambashiva Venkatraman. So she did a lot of crosses between sugarcane and grass. In Janaki Ammal did a lot of crosses between sugarcanes and grass and maize just to get the perfect hybrid which would sustain, which would grow in India, which is sweeter, and it was disease free or disease resistance and drought resistance. So this is the sugarcane. This is a picture of the sugarcane, wild sugarcane, which Janaki Ammal worked with, and they made this cross. And finally, I mean, after a lot of internal politics, I mean, this was published in 1938. It was a seminal paper in Nature, which she had published. I mean, at that time, publishing from an Indian institute in Nature was I mean, even today it is a big thing. So you can imagine it was a very big achievement in those days. So, and it was during this period that she also had an opportunity to go to US, to the UK for a conference. So she went to the John Innes Institute in UK, and where she met Professor C.D. Darlington. So he is also known as Newton of cytology. So he was an expert in cytogenesis, and so he happened to go there for a conference. And interestingly, it was during this period in 1940s, 41, where the World War started. So she was advised not to return to India because of the security issues for her. So she stayed in the John Innes Institute, and she had a very fruitful association with Professor Darlington, and they both wrote a book called The Chromosome Atlas of Cultivated Plants, which has they have described over 10,000 species of plants, their economic values, and their relative species. So the dedication was such for her that she stated once that she would dive under the bed at night during the bombings and continue her research the next day after cleaning the broken glasses off the shelf. So that was her dedication. So, and during this time, the Royal Horticultural Society also had employed her as an associate researcher, and she was the first woman scientist, the first woman botanist, not even Indian. It was the first woman botanist hired by the Royal Horticultural Society to work for them from 1946 to 1951. So, I mean, we don't employ women people, but yeah, it was there at that time as well. So after 1951, India got independence, and they really needed someone to take stock of the rich botanical reserves in India. So she was asked to return to India, and she was appointed a special officer in the Botanical Survey of India, the BSI. So at the BSI, she started, she was sucked into the administration, and she could not do her research as she wanted. I mean, she could have got the post of the director of BSI, but due to internal politics, because she was very much against the government policies of diversification of the land area, because it would have endangered the biodiversity of some places. So she was very vocal about it. So during that period, because of that vocalness, she lost out on many opportunities. So finally, she quit the BSI in 1959, and she joined the CSIR lab in Jammu, and where she did a lot of research in ethnobotany. She was continuing to publish till her last years in 1984, and I mean, she was very dedicated till the end. So the awards and recognition got by her was she was the first Indian female to get a doctorate of science in botany from the US. She was the first woman botanist to be a member of the Indian Academy of Sciences, which used to be a prestigious organization. And she was honored with the Padma Award in 1977. And the NDA government in 1999-2000, they had given a national award for taxonomy under her name in the year 1999-2000. So in the Royal Horticultural Society, they had Janaki Ammal had grown a flower, and they have named the flower Magnolia Cobus Janaki Ammal. So that is the tribute they have given to Janaki Ammal. So this is one of the yellow flower which was grown by the couple you see here on the left and the middle. They are Girija and Veeru Venkatraghavan. So they had prepared a rose, the hybrid rose, which is yellow color, and they had named it Janaki Ammal very recently, like 2 or 3 years back. And the best tribute the University of Michigan had given to Janaki Ammal was to give her an honorary LLD degree, and they had said that she had the ability to make painstaking and accurate observation, and her patient endeavors stand as a model for serious and dedicated scientific workers. So this was a statement given out by Michigan in University of Michigan in 1956 when they gave her this honorary LLD. But again, in this day no one even talks about her, nobody even knows about her. I mean, yeah, you can look at it in the Wikipedia, it has a Wikipedia page, but still there is lots of things which we should know about her research and everything, but I mean, we don't even talk about her. And even if you go dig deep into her personal life, there is nothing much you can take out. So my next scientist, so this was a scientist who had got recognition, who struggled but had got some recognition from the government. So these are the references I had used. So this scientist is Dr. Biba Chowdhury, which was a forgotten genius. I say that because she was born in 1933 and she's rarely mentioned in India, but she was one of the pioneering physicists who did research in pre-independence and continued to do it post-independence. And she was, it is really surprising that she is not even mentioned by the today's physicists because she was so close to get the Nobel Prize. And she was the one who took the particle physics from its infancy to the stage where it is today. And she was, along with D.M. Bose, just missed the Nobel Prize. And she was the one who laid the foundation of meson research, which was one of the hot topics in the early 1900s. So she was the third woman physicist to graduate from Calcutta University and first to continue her research along the same lines. So she attended the Bethinois School, which is one of the oldest Asian girls' schools in Calcutta. And she attended the Scottish Church College, which is an alumni of Subhash Chandra Bose and Swami Vivekananda. And from doing her Scottish Church College BSc, she did her master's from the Calcutta University, and she joined Dr. D.M. Bose, another great physicist of modern India. And she joined him in his research in cosmic rays. So Dr. D.M. Bose took interest in cosmic rays research, and he first built the first cloud chamber was built by Dr. D.M. Bose. And here he started to bombard he used the alpha particles to bombard the hydrogen and nitrogen atoms to create the cosmic ray effect. At that time, the one of the theories was that one of the particles which would be in the cosmic rays would be a particle which would be at least 200 times the mass of electrons. That was a theory which was proposed. And by the way, the meson name was given by Dr. Homi Jahangir Baba. So she took up the research with Dr. D.M. Bose, and this is the cloud chamber of Dr. Bose I was talking about. And they used this photographic plates called the Ilford plates, and they took these plates to high altitudes, because the cosmic rays are the ones which you can detect in high altitude, and that's why India was one of the popular choices to study the cosmic rays, because of the high ranges present in India. So they took these Ilford plates to high ranges, and as a control, the control was a Ilford plate kept inside a refrigerator. That was their experiment. So this is how they did their experiment. So they were the first to show that if you see this numbering 1, 2 and 3. So this was the first empirical evidence that they could see these particles. They could see these particles, and then they provided 3 seminal papers that could almost have fetched them a Nobel Prize. So the first one was the origin and nature of heavy ionization particles detected on the photographic plates exposed to the cosmic rays, which was published in, I think it was 1941. And then they could estimate the mass of mesotron, which was around 147 to 210 ME, which is mass of electron, which was almost what it was predicted before. And then again followed by another method of estimating the mass of the mesotron. These are 2 different papers which is talking about 2 methods. So these 3 papers would have almost fetched them the Nobel Prize, because this was not, nobody had quantified the mesons experimentally, and nobody could detect their mass at that time. But because this period was the period of World War, they could not follow it with other experiments, and because they were not able to procure this Ilford plates, and this Ilford plate had to come from Germany. So it was that research was stopped. But fortunately or unfortunately, Professor C.F. Powell used the same methods to detect 2 different types of mesons, and he got the Nobel Prize in I think in the late 1940s. So, and he did mention that it was this method that made him do to find the different mesons. But it was really unfortunate, because of the World War they had missed out on a golden opportunity to get a Nobel Prize, because at that time to do something in India and to get a Nobel Prize was a very big thing. The only person I think that he did was Dr. C.V. Raman, who could do it within India. So at that time, so because of the lack of resources, I think Biba Chowdhury went to University of Manchester to do her PhD. So she again joined Professor Patrick M.S. Blacklet, who would in future get the Nobel Prize for his research on cosmic rays and showers. So here, this was the PhD thesis, which was from her autobiography by Dr. S.C. Bose, which goes by Jewel Unearthed. So this is her thesis of Biba Chowdhury, and her research showed that the showers are the penetrating origins of the showers were not due to mesons, but due to lighter particles, which has a very short shelf life. That was her finding of the research. And because Professor Blacklet at that time had got the Nobel Prize, she was a subject of she became a big subject of discussion, because she was the first Indian student of Dr. Blacklet, and he was a Nobel laureate, and everybody wanted to interview her, and because she had done her PhD with Dr. Blacklet. So this was a newspaper article which was, I think, in 1949, sorry. So where they had, so she came back to India, and when Dr. Homi Jahangir Baba was looking for young physicists to join his particle experiments at the Kolar goldfield, which was incidentally the first neutrino event was recorded in the Kolar goldfield. So he wanted a young woman physicist to join the research, and they had appointed Biba Chaudhary to conduct more experiments at Kolar goldfield, which was a defunct gold mine. So she did a lot of experiments, and she wanted to duplicate these experiments in Mount Abu. So at that time, Vikram Sarabhai had promised her that she would be able to do so. But the untimely death of Dr. Sarabhai prevented her to do so. And there were two reasons which is debated popularly, that she therefore had to quit this Kolar goldfields. One was that people say that it is due to, she was oppressed because she was so female, she was oppressed. But if you go at this time when she was doing all this research, there was hardly any publications from her. So that could also be one of the reasons why, she was not preferred to go to do experiments in Mount Abu. Anyway, she joined the Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics, where she virtually did her research till the end of her, till the last year. The last paper published by her was in the year 1990, and she died in 1991. So she was really dedicated, but it was really surprising that she did not publish as much as people would have expected her to publish, especially with the background she had. In spite of all these things, her life was devoid of any major recognition. Nobody knows who is Biba Chaudhary even to this date. So her research in the field of high energy and cosmic ray physics has been extensively reviewed and rated superb. But she is a truly unsung hero of Indian science. And she was not elected to any celebrated science academy, as you have seen with Janaki Mal, who was in the Indian National Academy of Sciences. And the only recognition was, 1 or 2 years ago, when a star was named Biba recently by the International Astronomical Union. And that was the only recognition she has till date. She has no other recognition so far. And so my last scientist would be Himmat Rao Bavaskar, and he is an authority on scorpion sting. So he was named Himmat in the childhood, but he would prove to live to his name in the later years. So this is the scorpion sting, which was at that, even today, is a menace in the Western Ghats because the venom is really toxic. So he was born to a poor farmer, and he battled all odds to go into the medical university. But even though he was a very good student and he had a very good memory power, he was very depressed because the teaching was not adequate. So he was not happy with the teaching in the medical university. So he was so depressed that he was forced to take medication for depression. So that's how he passed his medical degree, and he joined as a public health officer in Malhad because he wanted to go to the rural areas again from where his roots were. When he went, he was shocked to see the poor state and the chalta hai attitude of the physicians at that time. There was rampant corruption, and he was shocked to see that the unhygienic levels in the public health care system at those times. He was surprised. He started to take initiative and started to reform the place and work culture there. He was surprised that there was a lot of scorpion stings, and people were dying because of these scorpion stings. And this is the species Buthus tamulus, which is the red scorpion. And he wanted to see if there were any cures, but every cure was inadequate. So he took upon himself to study all these cases. He asked everyone to direct all the scorpion sting cases to himself. So he took up the challenge, and he researched without any proper infrastructure. His only tools were a stethoscope, a blood pressure meter, keen observation, meticulous record keeping. And this, one of the patients stung by a scorpion. This was the X-ray image, and he found that one of the causes was the pulmonary edema after the scorpion sting. So he prepared a case and sent it to Haffkine Institute, which is, so he sent it to Haffkine Institute, and they published a report based on his findings in the Lancet journal, which is again a prestigious journal. So at that time, the cure was still not available, so they had just mentioned these are all the symptoms of the scorpion sting, because that stings were not only a concern in India, it was also a concern in many tropical countries. So he wanted to enhance his knowledge, so he went to do his post-graduation and further research, and he did his MD in BJ Medical College. So he prepared. After that, he started to prepare a very conscientious record of 51 cases of scorpion stings, and he sent all his observations, and that he found that the symptoms and which would lead to a heart failure. That was his observation, and then he found that this drug called sodium nitroprusside would help in alleviating that. So he sent his findings to an Indian journal, but it was rejected because his English was poor. So then he sent his findings to the Lancet journal, and it was accepted in 8 days. It was accepted in 8 days, and this was his report. So he found that sodium nitroprusside could be a cure for, one of the cures for the scorpion sting, and there was a correlation between the priapism and cardiac failure and the refractory heart disease. So, but the disadvantage with the sodium nitroprusside is that it has to be given, I mean, you have to monitor it very, very closely. You cannot monitor it just like that. So the monitoring is that even in ICU settings, it is very difficult to monitor, and it has got a lot of side effects, sodium nitroprusside. So so during this research, he also came across another hypothesis or inference from his experiment, that scorpion envenomation leads to catecholamine release, and this causes cardiac dysfunction and pulmonary edema. And prazosin is a drug which could inhibit this process. So he started to use prazosin as a drug, and he used it on more than 214 cases of scorpion sting, and mortality of the scorpion stings dropped from 40% to less than 5%. And this was a very similar paper. It was published in Lancet, and it was also published as lately in 2011 in the British Medical Journal, because this was a cure which the world had eagerly awaited for the scorpion sting, because everybody started to use this treatment. I mean, even now, this treatment is the most popular treatment for scorpion stings. So he had treated more than I think 200 cases with this, and he got critical acclaim because of this. But unfortunately, we still don't know about him. I mean, he has done also other works on the prognosis of great snake bites, which is again an issue in the Western Ghats. And then he also goes around with doing the fluorine levels in waters in Malhad district, and he also had he developed a score to suspect hypothyroidism in rural setting with no resources at all. He could detect the hypothyroidism, and then he also found that the scorpion venom might be useful for the treatment of genetic heart disease, because some scorpion venom are of medical use. So he is now currently researching on that. It's only, I mean, there is one autobiography in Marathi recently released by him, which is, I cannot pronounce this because my mother tongue is not Marathi. But apart from that, people are oblivious of his existence. He is internationally acclaimed. People from Oxford have come and visited him, but Indians they don't know about him, and which is a shame because we should be the ones to celebrate these scientists. I would conclude by saying again that I thank this opportunity given by Srijan Foundation. I'm really thankful to everyone. Namaste to all of you.
Hi, Raghavendra.
Hi.
So, first of all, I would really like to congratulate you that it was such a informative session, and frankly, none of the three names actually were known to us, and also the enthusiasm with which you spoke, that also infected us a lot.
Thank you.
So my question is basically that the basic undercurrent in the entire presentation, as I could understand, was that we have forgotten these people who contributed a lot,
Yes.
and very significantly at the global level.
Yes.
So though as a society we'll be progressing forward because it's going to be an Asian century in the time to come, but being yourself a researcher, I would like to ask you the role of science communication as a discipline in itself in order to inform the society itself.
Yes.
Because this science communication department is a very established field outside India, and many of the prominent researchers, they themselves see that their research is communicated and disseminated to the wider audience.
Yes.
But not in India so much. So how do you think this
That's
scenario
a
can
very
change?
good question. I feel I will not generalize it, but many I've seen even here and even in abroad, the importance. I mean, yeah, if someone comes up with some discovery, so they call the newspapers, or I mean, here we call the Indian Express or the Hindu, or where the science and technology section covers them. But sadly, it is only the professors who are highlighted. I mean, it's not the students who get the importance, because it is them who are doing everything. Like, they are spending all the time. They are coming up with the ideas. Yes, professors would give them feedback, good feedbacks. I mean, without that, it would not go forward. But I think the professors also should be large-hearted to give most of the credits to students, so that the encouragement will be there. And especially in Indian curriculum, I think the science education, I mean, like this, something like this should be added into the, I mean, you don't need to go in depth for all the research, everything done, but you should know about all these scientists. And even when you are communicating, I mean, if someone communicates, you should see the credentials of the person, because I have seen many articles on the Aryan-Dravidian divide communicated by some person, which, I mean, he may not be a scientist. So, I mean, we don't have the veracity to judge. I mean, if a journalist is writing something, so he's not a scientist per se. You have to go to the roots and see the person, see the work done. Also, I would think that it would be better if you communicate in a way people could understand. I mean, we write science in a way people don't understand. It's a very bad thing to do. I mean, this is how science works. If we write, I mean, we have papers in some good journals, but I mean, if I give it to any person who is not from the field, he will sleep in the second or third paragraph. That's it. It's not exciting. People use jargons, people use terms which we don't understand. And then we have to go and cross-refer to those terms and try to understand. People don't have the time for that. So I think the science communication should be as simple. Keep it very simple. You should tell the story as simply as you could, especially when it is aimed for a broader audience. Yes, if it is an audience which is all physicists or chemists, you can use all the jargons you want. But especially in a newspaper, or if that's what I think you are meaning, yeah, especially in those areas. Yes. In those things, you should have some way you communicate it properly, so that people also can ask questions. If you communicate something I don't understand, I will not be able to ask you any questions. Only if I know what you're talking about, then only I can answer some. At least I can ask you some thoughtful questions. Yeah, I think that is the drawback, I feel.
In your personal capacity, are you trying to change that as well?
I try to write in a better way. Only now I have started to do all these things, because before I was also not, I was as neutral or something before the social media explosion. Now only I have started to learn about these things. So I'm a novice, a beginner here at now, but hopefully I will improve myself in the future.
Hi. Just going back to your first early 1 or 2 slides on speed of light and all, you mentioned the shloka but didn't explain the meaning. Would you be able to do that? And also of the Hanuman Chalisa reference, because that may be a little controversial on what it means and all. So if you could explain that.
I will try to do the speed of light. So, I'm just saying what H.C. Verma had said in his book. So here the hymn goes, Yojanam Shahasra Dave Dave Shate Dave Cha Yojane Ekenam Nimshardhena Kramanana Namostute. So the author pay respect to, I think, the sunlight, who moves at 2202 yojanas in half a minute. So in the modern maths, it's like this. So one yojana is 4 kos. 1 kos is 8,000 British yards. 1 British yard is 0.9144 meters. And if you go here, this is how you come to this. The sunlight travels this many meters in half a second. That's how, so if you calculate, that will be your speed of light.
Hi.
Hi.
My question is very small, and it has to something to do which you mentioned just now, that these things should be incorporated in school curriculum and must be told to students. But my basic argument on this is that there is a long, you can say, long literature on history as well, long literature on architecture as well, long literature on literature as well. So, are you suggesting that we keep burdening us children to read more and more about those stuff? Because we cannot stop at one level. I agree with 100% of this, that these things must be taught to us, to children. But same argument is applied to history as well. I love each and everything. I love to read history, architecture, but can we go on burdening our children regarding this?
That is a good question.
It is as an accepted notion that Indian students are very much already burdened with the subject matter and everything. And if we keep pushing them on these subjects as well, is it a good way to go ahead when we are, when we have, you can say, the modern science coming in? We want to take inspiration from them, but where do we stop then? It is applicable in each and every field of
First of all, you don't need to consider this as a subject per se, where you are questioned on examinations, no examination. Keep it as no examination. Have it, instead of having a moral class, have a class of Indian scientists or Indian history or whatever, who we don't know. You can purge out some of the history we have today. Some history, you have pages and pages of some kings and emperors. You can at least reduce that and increase on some other.
In our times, there was a subject called history of science.
Yes.
And it had all this, on science and technology and this of our historical times.
Yes, yes.
And it was a very interesting book. I thought of it.
Yeah.
So it can be a
One small question, like our research in comparison to the world is still very small, and the reason maybe like French, Germans, Chinese, Japanese, Russians are doing their in native language till their PhD level.
Yes.
But our people from our native languages are after +2. You have to study in English.
Yes, that is very true.
Our progression, that riddle can be solved in some way, because our students are quite talented.
Yes.
But after +2, they have to, physics, they need to interpret the question.
Yes.
To understand what is how to answer.
Yes.
Because a lot of talent in our villages get stopped.
Yes.
There.
That's a very good suggestion. You have to do it in your primary language, but the problem is that when you're writing papers at this level, it is fortunately it's English which dominates, but Chinese professor use English translators to translate their, I mean, they write the papers for them. The English translators write the papers for Chinese professors. I have heard of that. So you can do the same. But then it would involve a sea of change from the beginning, where you have to establish that you know everything, you have to do it in your own language. For example, Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi had written his thesis in Hindi. It was also on physics, to the best of my knowledge. So yeah, you can do it. But I don't know at this age how much you will have the reach if you are writing it in your native language. That is my only concern. That is the only concern. Yes, if you want to change it, you have to change from the roots. Yes, that's a very good suggestion, because people would be comfortable in their native languages. But we are not competing inside India or inside with China alone or with someone else. We're competing with the world. So it's how you are communicating your research with the world also matters.
It is French, Japanese.
Yes. So even if you see Russian journals, they are not, I mean, some journals are good, but some are not rated as high. I mean, this might be one of the reasons.
In terms of science communication, don't you think you have just made a case for proper language education rather than English or Indian languages or anything? Because don't you think that language is essentially neglected in the science stream, regardless of what language you do it in?
Yes.
And just because people get to do science in the native language doesn't mean that they are necessarily proficient in that language. There's a
Yes,
difference
that's true.
between-
That's true.
Yeah,
That is true.
you
That
can
is true.
use any language easily for transactions.
Yes. I mean, again, language will only be a mean of you communicating it to the world. It is your research which, to me, that matters more than the.
No, but my point is, if you're using the language to communicate your research,
Yes.
you ought to have sufficient proficiency in it.
Grasp in the
also.
language. Grasp in the language.
Grasp
Yes.
of the language
Yes.
and how it can be used.
Yes.
Just because you can use it transactionally doesn't mean that
Yes. True. I
you're
agree.
good at writing
Yeah.
papers in your native
Yes.
language.
Yes.